The office was a storm of phone calls, contracts, and rising voices. Daniel Carter, one of the city's most respected CEOs, sat behind his glass desk with his tie loosened and his patience wearing thin. His assistant stood trembling at the door while his 8-year-old twin daughters chased each other around the office, giggling as they spilled juice across a stack of important papers. Daniel slammed a folder shut, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I said find me someone reliable. Today," he barked into the phone, his eyes following the chaos that his daughters left behind. "I don't care what it costs. I need someone who can handle them." The twins, Lily and Lila, had become little whirlwinds ever since their mother passed away 3 years ago. Daniel loved them more than life itself, but between running a billion-dollar company and raising 2 mischievous girls, he was on the edge. His staff had already lost count of how many nannies had quit after just one day. That was when the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A young woman stepped out, dressed simply in a pale sweater, jeans, and sneakers. She carried no fancy bag, no resume folder, only a calm smile that seemed strangely out of place in the corporate tower. The secretary hurried to introduce her. "Mr. Carter, this is Emma. She's here for the babysitter position." Daniel looked her up and down, unimpressed. His voice was sharp. "You don't look like the type who can manage these two." He gestured toward the twins, who were now climbing onto a leather chair and pretending it was a pirate ship. Emma didn't flinch. She crouched down to their level, her eyes soft and kind. "Hi there," she said gently. "I'm Emma. What are your names?" The twins looked at each other, amused. Nobody ever asked them like that, like they mattered. "I'm Lily," one said proudly. "And I'm Lila," the other chimed in. Emma smiled wider. "Lily and Lila," she repeated as if the names were precious jewels. "Do you like stories? I know one about 2 sisters who built a castle out of pillows." The girls' eyes lit up instantly. Within minutes, they were dragging cushions off the sofa, laughing as Emma joined them on the floor. She didn't tell them to sit still or scold them for being noisy. Instead, she channeled their energy, turning it into play. For the first time in weeks, the twins were actually focused, engaged, happy, alive. Daniel stood frozen near his desk, arms crossed. He had seen countless nannies try to win his daughters over with bribes, candy, or false cheerfulness. None of them had worked. But this young woman, with no qualifications in hand and no sign of nerves, had managed to capture their hearts in mere minutes. He cleared his throat. "Impressive," he admitted reluctantly, though suspicion lingered in his tone. "But this isn't a playground. These girls need discipline, structure, routine." Emma glanced up at him with calm eyes. "Sometimes, Mr. Carter, what children need most isn't discipline, it's to feel seen. Once they know they're loved, routine follows." Her words struck him harder than he expected. For a brief second, he saw the faintest trace of something familiar in her gaze, but he brushed the thought away. He wasn't looking for philosophy, he was looking for results. And yet, as he watched his daughters giggling freely, hugging Emma as if she had always belonged, something deep in his chest stirred. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Fine," he muttered. "You can stay, for now. But if you fail like the others, you're out." Emma nodded, not intimidated. "I understand." She turned back to the girls, her laughter mingling with theirs. Daniel returned to his desk, pretending to focus on his papers, but his eyes betrayed him, drifting back again and again toward the mysterious babysitter who had walked into his office like a quiet storm, uninvited, unassuming, but impossible to ignore. The days that followed felt different in the Carter household. For once, the walls weren't echoing with tantrums or the sound of slammed doors. Instead, laughter spilled from the kitchen, music hummed from the living room, and Daniel found himself pausing at the threshold more often than he cared to admit. Emma had slipped into the girls' lives as if she'd always been there. Each morning, she greeted them with a warmth that made them forget to start their usual mischief. Breakfast, once a battlefield of spilled cereal and complaints, became an adventure. Emma made smiley faces out of pancakes and let the twins pour syrup until they giggled themselves silly. When Lily accidentally dropped her juice, Emma didn't scold her. She simply handed her a towel and said, "Accidents make us learn faster than rules do." After school, the house was alive with activity. Instead of gluing themselves to tablets, The girls sprawled across the carpet with coloring books, or staged puppet shows behind the sofa. Emma always found a way to turn ordinary things into magic. One evening, she transformed an old bedsheet into a tent, filling it with fairy lights. The twins sat inside, listening to her voice as she told them stories about courage, kindness, and sisters who protected each other no matter what. Their eyes glowed, reflecting the twinkle of the lights above them. Daniel had grown used to the chaos of childcare, nannies quitting, daughters sulking, constant interruptions during his late-night work sessions. Yet now, when he passed their room and found the twins tucked in early, their tiny hands resting peacefully against their pillows, he stopped at the doorway, stunned. He whispered into the silence, as though afraid to break it, "She's different." At work, however, whispers had begun to stir. The skyscraper's glass corridors carried rumors like wildfire. Some of the older staff exchanged knowing looks, lowering their voices when Emma came to drop off the girls after piano lessons or ballet practice. "Strange," one secretary murmured to another. "Don't you think she looks familiar?" "Like who?" "Like the boss's daughter. The one who disappeared years ago." The other secretary scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Why would she be here, playing babysitter?" Still, her eyes lingered, suspicious. Emma noticed the stares. She felt the heat of their curiosity every time she crossed the lobby, her hoodie pulled low, her steps brisk. She wasn't ready for questions. She wasn't ready for him to know. So she kept her head down, focusing only on Lily and Lila, who clung to her hand and chattered about their day. But Daniel noticed too. He noticed the way Emma dodged conversations with the staff, the way she avoided long glances in his direction. He noticed how she seemed too thoughtful for a simple babysitter, how her words carried weight he couldn't quite explain. And though he told himself it was none of his business, he found himself watching her more carefully. One evening, he returned home earlier than usual, loosening his tie as he stepped into the kitchen. There, he found Emma standing by the stove with the twins perched on stools beside her, their hands covered in flour as they kneaded dough. The room was filled with the smell of warm bread and the sound of giggles. "Push with your palms, not your fingers," Emma coached, demonstrating with her own piece of dough. Lila looked up at her father. "Daddy, we're making dinner tonight. Emma says it tastes better when you make it yourself." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "I see. So now you're little chefs." His eyes lingered on Emma, who smiled softly but avoided meeting his gaze. For a fleeting second, he thought he saw something familiar in that smile, something he couldn't place, yet stirred an ache deep in his chest. He brushed it off, sitting at the table as his daughters beamed with flour-dusted pride. The bread was burnt at the edges and the soup was too salty, but Daniel ate every bite. For the first time in years, he didn't care about perfection. What mattered was the warmth at the table, the sound of his daughter's laughter filling the silence that had haunted their home for too long. And Emma, quietly, with eyes full of secrets, sat across from him, holding back the truth that threatened to spill with every passing day. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels almost too heavy to last. Daniel arrived home earlier than usual, his footsteps echoing through the grand yet lonely halls of the mansion. He loosened his tie, expecting to hear the usual chatter of cartoons or the bickering of his daughters, but instead, he heard soft voices coming from the twins' room. Curiosity led him to the doorway, and what he saw made him stop cold. Emma was sitting cross-legged on the floor between the two little beds. Both girls leaned against her shoulders, their eyes heavy with sleep. In Emma's hands was a delicate silver locket, its chain catching the faint glow of the bedside lamp. She whispered to the girls as she opened it, revealing a tiny photograph. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The photo, he knew it well. It was an old family picture, one he hadn't looked at in years. His late wife smiled warmly from the frame, with a much younger Daniel standing beside her. Between them, a little girl, barely 7 years old, grinned, holding her father's hand tightly. It was Emma. Daniel's world seemed to tilt. He stepped inside, his voice hoarse and breaking. "Emma, my God, Emma." The twins startled awake, looking from their father to Emma in confusion. Emma's hands shook as she closed the locket quickly, but it was too late. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling before she could stop them. She stood, trembling. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," she whispered. Daniel's voice hardened, though it cracked at the edges. Why would you hide this from me? My daughter. My little girl. I thought you were gone forever. His words stumbled, caught between anger and disbelief. Emma's lips quivered. I wasn't hiding to hurt you. I needed to know. Her gaze flickered toward the twins, who clutched her hands desperately. I needed to know if you'd still love me. If there was a place for me in this family after all these years. I wanted to meet them, my sisters, before I told you. The girls gasped, their small voices overlapping. Sisters. She's our sister. Emma knelt, her tears falling freely now. Yes, Lily. Yes, Lila. I'm your big sister. I never stopped thinking about you, even when I was far away. The twins threw their arms around her, their tiny bodies clinging as though afraid she might disappear. Daniel, watching this, felt his chest tighten until he couldn't breathe. He had buried his grief for so long, convinced he had lost his first child, carrying the guilt in silence. And now she was here, in his home, in his arm's reach, looking at him with the same eyes as her mother. His stern facade crumbled. He dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around all three of his daughters. His voice broke, raw and unguarded. I failed you once, Emma. I will never let you slip away again. Emma sobbed into his shoulder, clinging to him like the child she once was. The twins, sandwiched between them, giggled through their tears. Daddy, we have a big sister now. Forever, right? Daniel nodded, pressing his forehead against Emma's hair. Forever, he vowed. From this moment, we are a family again. Nothing will tear us apart. The staff, who had gathered silently in the hall, gasped at the scene before them. They had whispered, they had wondered, but now they saw the truth with their own eyes. The CEO, the man known for his steel heart and ruthless drive, was on the floor with his daughters, weeping and laughing at the same time, holding onto them as though his life depended on it. Later that night, when the girls were finally asleep, Daniel stood on the balcony with Emma at his side. The city lights glittered in the distance, but his focus was only on her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice softer than it had ever been. You asked if I would still love you, he said. The truth is, I never stopped. You're my daughter, Emma. And now, you're home. Emma smiled through her tears, the burden she had carried for years finally lifting. Behind them, the twins stirred in their sleep, safe, loved, and complete. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Carter was not just a CEO, not just a single father. He was whole again, with his three daughters beside him, exactly where they all belonged.